class, now that you've read the objectives and looked at some of the pictures of the text and defined the vocabulary words, we will go through and read the text together. So follow along as I read, and we'll skip over some places, so I'll make sure you know where I'm reading at the time. So we're learning about the United States and Canada and the geography of those two countries. So the first section now, we're talking about the land, and it says, the United States and Canada form a geographic region of enormous physical variety and natural wealth. This wealth includes breathtaking landforms shaped by the forces of water, wind, and geology over millions of years. These landforms, such as rugged mountainous areas near Yellowstone National Park, have attracted adventurers and inspired writers for decades. So, landforms. As the physical map on page 120 shows, mountainous rise at the eastern and western edges of the United States and Canada. In the west, young, sharp-edged mountain ranges tower above plateaus that descend to vast plains. These plains extend across the continent to meet the lower, more eroded mountains in the east. So the first section we'll learn about is the western mountains, plains, and plateaus. Collisions between tectonic plates millions of years ago thrust up a series of sharp-peaked mountains called the Pacific Ranges. These ranges include the Sierra Nevada, the Cascade Range, the Coast Range, and the Alaska Range. The Alaska Range gives rise to the highest point on the continent, Mount McKinley, at 20,320 feet. Like the Pacific Ranges, the Rocky Mountains grew as geologic forces heaved slabs of rock upward. The Rocky Mountains link the United States and Canada, stretching more than 3,000 miles from New Mexico to Alaska. Some peaks of the Rockies soar to more than 14,000 feet. Dry basins and plateaus fill the area between the Pacific Ranges and the Rockies. The Columbia Plateau in the north was formed by lava that seeped from cracks in the earth. The heavily eroded Colorado Plateau displays flat-top mesas and the majestic Grand Canyon of the Colorado River. At its deepest, the canyon's steep walls plunge 6,000 feet. The Great Basin cradles Death Valley and the lowest place in the United States. Canada's plateaus are colder and narrower than those in the United States. East of the Rockies, the land falls and flattens into the Great Plains, which extend 300 to 700 miles across the center of the region. The Great Plains reach elevations up to 4,000 feet. Although the plains appear flat, the land slopes downward at about 10 feet per mile to the central lowlands along the Mississippi River. You can see here on the left is the cool, moist air going over the mountains, and it gets blocked, which is called a rain shadow, if you remember from science class probably a few years back. So the rain can't go through, so on the other side of the mountain is hot, dry winds, and that's where you get dry plateaus. So the eastern mountains and lowlands. East of the Mississippi, the land rises slowly into the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. At the edge of the Canadian Plains, the Canadian Shield, a giant core of rock centered on the Hudson and James Bays anchor the continent. This stony land makes up the eastern half of Canada and the northeastern United States. In northern Quebec the Canadian Shield descends to the Hudson Bay. The heavily eroded Appalachian Mountains are North America's oldest mountains. They are the continent's second largest mountain range, extending about 1,500 miles from Quebec to central Alabama. The Appalachians were formed by powerful upheavals when the Earth's crust and shaped over time by ice and running water. Coastal lowlands lie east and south of the Appalachians. Between the mountains and the coastal lowlands in the Piedmont, a wide area of rolling hills, many rivers cut through the Piedmont, flowing east of the Atlantic coastal plain in the Carolinas. In the southeast, the The Gulf coastal plain extends westward into Texas. So we're going to skip over the island section, because we know that we have islands such as Hawaii, and they're made out of volcanic rock. So now we're going to learn about the water systems. Freshwater lakes and rivers have helped make the United States and Canada prosperous. Abundant water satisfies the needs of cities and rural areas, provides power for homes and industries, and moves resources across the continent. So the first water source we'll talk about is rivers. In North America, the high ridge of the Rockies is called the Continental Divide, or the Great Divide. A divide is a high point or a ridge that determines the direction in which the rivers flow. East of the Continental Divide, waters flow toward the Arctic Ocean, Hudson Bay, Atlantic Ocean, and the Mississippi River system, which empties into the Gulf of Mexico. To the west, waters flow into the Pacific Ocean. Rivers such as the Colorado and the Rio Grande have their headwaters, or source, in the Rockies. Many tributaries, or smaller rivers and streams, connect with one of these two large rivers. Northeast of the Rockies, the Mackenzie River, which flows from the Great Salve Lake to the Arctic Ocean, drains much of Canada's northern interior. The Mississippi River, one of North America's longest rivers, flows 2,350 miles from its source. It begins in Minnesota as a stream so narrow that a person can easily jump across it. From a narrow stream at its source, the Mississippi River reaches its width of 1.5 miles as it empties into the Gulf of Mexico. The river drains 1,200,000 square miles of land, including all or part of 31 U.S. states and 2 Canadian provinces. This enormous reach makes the Mississippi one of the world's busiest commercial waterways. In the eastern United States, the boundary called the Fall Line marks the place where the higher land of the Piedmont drops into the lower Atlantic coastal plain. Along the Fall Line, eastern rivers break into rapids and waterfalls, blocking ships from traveling farther inland. Canada's St. Lawrence River flows for 750 miles from Lake Ontario to the Gulf of St. Lawrence in the Atlantic Ocean, forming part of the border between Canada and the United States. The Canadian cities of Quebec, Montreal, and Ottawa grew up along the St. Lawrence River and its tributaries and depend on these waters for trade. Niagara Falls, Niagara Falls on the Niagara River, forms another part on the border between Canada and the United States. The two separate drops form and the falls, the Horseshoe Falls, adjoining the Canadian bank of the river, and the American Falls adjoining the U.S. bank. The falls are a major source of hydroelectric power for both countries. So, lakes and other waterways. In northern Canada, glacial dams created Great Bear Lake and Great South Lake. Glaciers also gouged the Canadian Shield and tore at the central section of the continent, leaving glacial basins that filled and became the Great Lakes. Large deposits of coal, iron, and other minerals near the lakes favored the development of the industries and urban growth in the area. Providing a link between inland and coastal waterways has been a crucial and economic development of North America. The greatest of these connections in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system, a series of canals, the St. Lawrence River, and other inland waterways that link the Great Lakes and the Atlantic Ocean. The Seaway helped make cities along the Great Lakes powerful trade and industrial centers.